Let's move on to standard 1C, which is misrepresentation. And that's maybe not exactly the same, but I loosely interpret misrepresentation as lying. And guess what? Lying would be a violation of the standards of professional conduct. So do not make misrepresentations relating to your investment analysis, recommendations, actions, or other professional activities. So don't lie. It wouldn't make your parents proud of you. In terms of guidance here, okay, remember that this is not just in what you say, it's not just in written communication, it's all communication. So it's oral, it's written, electronic. You've got to accurately represent yourself and your firm services, those types of things in all of your professional activities. So you can't misrepresent the qualifications, services, the firm, performance record. We'll talk a little more about that later, and the characteristics of an investment. There's going to be actually that second bullet point. We're going to have to say more about a couple of those points: performance record stuff and characteristics of an investment as we move through the rest of the standards. So there's still more to come. Hey, we can't obviously guarantee a certain return, so most blue sky laws prevent that in the United States anyway. And we can't plagiarize. So you can't use other people's work without attribution. So you can use work from other people, okay, but you've got to make sure that you are using that with attribution. So no plagiarism. That would be a violation of the misrepresentation standards. So what about what's recommended here? And so recommended procedures, well, first of all, the firm can assist each of us as individuals by providing a written list of the firm's services and a description of what it is and what they do and what their qualifications are. Well, that would make sense. Obviously, as an employee, this can, as an individual that is obligated to comply with this code and standards, unless you are the managing director or owner of the firm, you can't control this. Okay, but this is a recommended procedure, so you can recommend it to your employer, but you're not necessarily obligated to make sure this is done. But I think firms, by and large, have complied with this anyway. So you need to maintain records of materials used to prepare research reports. And you need to quote sources. So if you're using someone else's work, that is fine. Okay, you're going to have to make sure that you understand the quality of that work, and we'll get to that later on. Okay, but you can use other people's work as long as you are quoting sources. Remember, if you steal material from one person, okay, you are plagiarizing. If you steal it from 100, you're doing research. But whatever sources you're using, you've got to quote sources. Now, there is an exception to this, okay, and that is if you're using recognized financial and statistical reporting services. So if you were to make the claim that the arithmetic average return on the large cap U.S. stocks over the last 60 years was 8.6% plus the risk-free rate. Okay, well, and you got that from Ibbotson data. Well, you don't have to necessarily say, according to Ibbotson, this is the case, right? Well, Ibbotson is a well-recognized financial and/or statistical reporting service. So if you're using stuff from those types of entities, you don't have to quote the source. But if you're using a recommendation from another firm or some outside entity that's done work on this, okay, you can use it. But one, we'll see later, you're responsible for making sure it's good. Okay, that they weren't biased when they made that recommendation. Okay, but you do have to quote your sources, right? And then more recommended procedures on misrepresentation. Models and analysis of others at the firm can also be used without attribution. So if the person sitting in the cubicle next to you is doing something, they got a spreadsheet, they developed this, you're writing the report, so you can use, well, okay, right? So you're both on the same team. When you put that out to the public receives that as being issued under the auspices of the firm. So you don't have to say, well, the guy sitting next to me at Goldman or whatever he is has to necessarily, you don't have to attribute it to that individual. You both work for the same team. You're putting out information for the same team is the notion. So, and then you should encourage firms to establish procedures for verifying marketing claims of third parties that you recommend to clients. So if you are helping a firm do something in the M&A department and you have to recommend an insurance firm, okay, well, the firm ought to have a policy for establishing whether or not the marketing claims of these third-party recommendees are in fact doing what they say they are going to do. All right, so that's 1C on misrepresentation. Let's look at 1D for misconduct. I call this the mommy rule. So the mommy rule says basically don't engage in any activity that would make your mommy ashamed of you. So do not engage in professional activities or conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or commit any act that reflects adversely on your professional reputation, okay, or the reputation of the industry, okay, integrity or competence. So you don't do things that you know you shouldn't do, and if you feel bad about them afterwards, then you shouldn't have done them. So this is misconduct. Like I say, it's the mommy rule. It is very much all-encompassing, and it brings up another point, and that is when you the problems or the questions on the exam are very likely to involve violations of the Code of Ethics, and any single violation could violate a number of different parts of the professional standards or the Code of Ethics. So if you had someone that was plagiarizing, well, clearly that was a misrepresentation. Okay, if they plagiarized without verifying the quality of the work, well, that's going to violate another part of the standards that we're going to see later, and it would involve misconduct because essentially it's fraud. So a single act or a single action is a violation, but it can simultaneously be violating several different parts of the code and standards. And you would have to know, not necessarily all of them, but to say it violates which of these all of these standards except, well, you have to pick out the one that is not violating, or, here's one, it's violating 3, but they only give you a choice of one of those. Well, you're going to have to know the standards well enough to be able to identify, which standards, or standards, I guess is the right way to say that, have been violated. In terms of guidance, this standard covers conduct that may not be illegal. So we're not talking about what's legal and illegal here, okay? But if it adversely affects a member's ability to perform your duties, okay, if it is something that would impair your professional integrity or something that would make your mommy embarrassed, okay, then it is covered by this misconduct standard. In terms of recommended procedures, okay, well, we ought to adopt a code of ethics to which all employees have to adhere. So again, we saw this earlier, but you should be in the business of encouraging your employer to adopt a code of ethics if they haven't already. Disseminate a list of potential violations and perhaps have associated disciplinary sanctions. And then those last one, if you are responsible for hiring people at your firm, well, you should be conducting background checks. Okay, so what we want to do to begin with, one of the easiest ways to ensure that we have an organization that is ethical is to hire people who are ethical in the first place. So look for good character and, of course, eligibility to work in the investments industry if you are in the process of hiring. So misconduct, make sure you're doing things that don't hurt your conscience or make your mother upset, and you will probably be somewhat okay, at least in this one dimension.